Stop sharing my screen for 1 second. I gotta share the YouTube link with my wife so she can watch me.
You're a good husband, Ben.
Am I?
Mm-hmm, for sure. I was actually telling my mom about it this morning. I'm such a good dad. I'm such a good teacher.
All right, so let's talk about anything we've covered recently.
Yeah, enough time. Like on the homework last night.
So the homework last night was a problem?
Well, I think like the folders for me too, and some of the code I'm not like positive on.
Okay, well, we can go over homework kind of like a one-by-one afternoon.
Okay.
Is there anything in general that you're confused about with the code, or like?
Yes, and I think we got it. But like files needed to be in a templates folder because it's referencing a templates folder, right?
The Spark framework is going to, when it tries to render a template first.
Okay, so that's why we had to create a templates folder in our resources.
Yes.
Is there a way like that you can change that location? From what I could tell, it wasn't very well documented. Maybe that's because you said to do it.
Yeah,
That's
me too.
And there's a way you can configure that. I've never changed the default Spark template location.
Like you're just supposed to know that.
Yes. Like, that is one of those things that start getting into the framework world, like not be able to like just be able to discover things all the time. You have to like documentation, and sometimes things just you don't really understand it until you have experience with it.
So also, I was having all the same problems. It sounds like Mizzou's having, where like my API, like I ended up like copying and pasting a lot of my configuration from the API homework into this one. For like a better IntelliJ template. Like I'm making a Spark.
Not for Spark, no.
Okay.
IntelliJ isn't natively aware of Spark. The best you can do is create a new Maven project in IntelliJ and base it off of an archetype. It's like.
Okay.
So have you created a Maven project in IntelliJ yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then it's still like, it doesn't have any default run configuration. So I end up going through and manually adding like source 1.8, target 1.8.
Yeah.
Build this jar file I need to make. That's Heroku, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, like the Maven stuff, it could be a bit cumbersome to get started.
I thought I was doing something wrong. So it felt like I was like hacking.
No, like I think if you specify a different archetype when you develop your Maven. Myself, right?
So I remember said like languages, frameworks. So like Spark is a framework, right?
Yes.
Maven is a framework.
It is a task runner.
Okay.
It's not really a framework.
What concept collection?
framework is like our code base that you build an application in. It's a large code base. I mean, large is a relative term, right? I mean, bigger than Spark, but you're building your application in the Spring or in the Spark to do the heavy lifting of like application.
Okay.
Usually, if like you're building like a certain kind of application, that thing is the framework. Like you're building an Android application, Android's your framework. You know, a Java FX application, Java FX is your framework.
With Java FX, Spark, Android,
libgdx.
libgdx. Okay, and like what
And
where would that no.
no, Scene Builder's not really. That's just a helper for XML.
Okay.
Okay.
Are those the only ones we work with? Work with more.
We've done a lot of things, but that's about. We've used otherwise, like we've used the JOD JSON library, and we've also used the JSON library, and we've also used Heroku. Heroku really is a framework, but
Like I remember seeing that on a resume, and I was thinking that would be really great to put on your resume, just like everything.
I mean, even though not necessarily frameworks, you could say like just stuff I have experience with.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else?
I have a question. I'm just trying to.
Okay, Joy. Why is my screen not sharing? Share my entire screen.
So our frameworks are important then as well as like the language that you know.
I mean, they're not more important. They are going to be junior programmers from senior programmers is experience with those frameworks. I mean, language is definitely a big part of it, but when you start getting lots of like years of experience with Java under your belt, there's only so much you can learn. That's the reason why Avery was able to pick up Java like easily, because he's had programming experience in other languages. It's not the language itself that is a huge barrier, it's learning the frameworks that are written in the language.
Which is why I can probably put frameworks on his resume, the guy that I was.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, the things you have experience with using are important. Environment, but it's not like on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Because you'll know the language, it's just using it in the way that the framework needs you to use it because the experience.
And that makes sense now that we're like using it.
Okay, Joy.
How do you figure out what comes after? What did you call that thing yesterday? Pathway dependency, not dependency, pathway.
The relative path?
Saying,
The relative path?
how do you determine what comes after that?
Your web pages that exist on your website? You make it up.
In your code.
You can name it whatever you want, and then you just pick the name that makes the most sense to you. Like if you want a page that is like it lists the users, you might want to make that relative path / users.
And when we do that relative path, that's when we create the HTML that will work with HTML file that will work.
Yeah, I mean you could in that route use an existing HTML template, like an index.html template or home.template. That's not a strict requirement, and you can make a new one for that page if you want to.
Okay.
Did pretty well with the homework, so
You told me to move the hash map from static to those.
I still put it as a static field too.
That is where everything haywire and I reach. Yeah, but let's do this.
Sure.
We can do that.
all right. So today we're going to be talking about sessions.
Somebody's excited.
Again, pumped.
That's awesome.
What's up, Will? What are you doing? Okay, you just walking around. All right. So before we talk about sessions real quick, let's just talk a little bit more about Mustache. So we had experience with this yesterday where we used the Mustache syntax to write out dynamic stuff. This is just kind of a cheat sheet for what you could do in the future when you're working with this stuff. Like you have a point of reference for the basic operations you want to do in Mustache. String name will populate, it's how you reference that. If you have a hash map that's value is array list of names, bless you, iterate over a collection of those things with this weird looking thing here. I don't, it feel weird, but I hate it. But that's the way it is. It's just like, I guess the dot operator is supposed to go between two things, and if it's by itself, it just is very strange. All right, so message MSG. So like if message is an object, block here, message, and inside, there's at the end of it is this slash message. Then text and username are values that are fields from this class.
So the hash map message is a class.
Message MSG will go into a hash map. And the hash map key will be the string message. The value will be this MSG object. All messages have text and username fields, and this is how you reference them in Mustache.
And that's the path, the dash message.
Path, this is just indicating this is the end of the block of the message.
Okay.
Mustache syntax.
Got it.
Yeah. You can use this same syntax to iterate over a collection. If there's an array list message instead of one message, it's the same basic thing. This is going to be repeated over and over again. Elements exist in the array list. Yesterday.
Well, I know, but.
All right. Additionals, like if name exists, then we'll say welcome name, right? If it doesn't exist, then if it says not, if the not name is explicitly not existing, you can do not name. It says please log in.
I feel like it's like baby talk, like truthly, falsely. I just don't like that.
Yeah. Well,
What part of this is it a conditional, like, as far as that syntax is concerned?
Um,
Choosing.
it's just, you can think of the context of, like we're describing content in these templates. And so there's no if statements. It's just, it's more simplistic than that. So this is just the syntax. Like if you have a name, you pass into your template, this is just going to specify that it exists and then display it here. Just the Mustache is trying to make it as simplistic as possible for you to determine whether or not you can do something. So they don't have like a construct that's like if this then that.
Right.
It's just like actual syntax for everything, and we'll take care of it in a way that makes the most sense.
So then how does the system know that that in particular is a conditional?
Well, the Mustache templating engine is going to look at your hash map, template string. It's going to say, look, it's going to parse this guy right here and say we're trying to render a name here. Name. And it's going to just bail out of this whole block. It's going to replace this with nothing. Okay? But if it does find a name, it's going to take this, replace this name field with hash map. Right? Nothing here that's like if that, then do this. Other than that, that if statement down into just this hash syntax, so you don't have to worry about something like that. But if you want to like have a login, like if it's like explicitly like when someone's not, when this doesn't exist, then so, hello Spark.
I'm sorry, so in that case, that little, whatever this is called, in front of name, how's that different than the hash? I mean, I understand that the hash is kind of like, if it says then it's that, and so what's the difference between back and the, whatever you call it?
What are you referring to? What's the difference between this
Yeah,
and
the
this?
falsy and the
This and this.
Yes.
Hash and it's a character. and CARE.
Okay.
In logical expressions, like logical operators, this is sometimes mean.
So in this case, it means not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in this case, it means not. What we're going to do is add multi-user support to HelloSpark. Let's talk about a weakness of our HelloSpark program right now. I don't know if you guys can think back to yesterday, but in class, we have a user field, right? So when you log in, it sets the current user field. So let's think about how that is versus how it's on the web page. If I were to like open up that same web page in the incognito window, what should happen? Any page like Facebook in an incognito window. Yes. But for our app, we're not determining it's based off of anything that the client has. We're just like the server holds a reference to a user. It's that same user.
So there's no security.
Multi-user support. There's no concept of users. It's not a thing. When we posted, we set the current user equal to post the page at once. Every time they refresh the page, there's no guarantee as to who's going to be the current user at that time, right? Posted that form last. It's not how actual websites work. It's just a concept. Yesterday, we wanted to talk about users, but we weren't ready to talk about sessions yet, so we just made it this context user for an application. We went to you open up an incognito window, and what mechanism forces you to log in? We have these things called cookies on our computers. In our web browsers, we have cookies. You guys seem to be somewhat familiar with cookies. They're kind of a thing, right? Our data sent about the request on every request and response. So when you make a request to the web server, if you have cookie data sent, also sent to the web server as well. When you're making a request, it's not just, hey, here, give me the user's page. It's also, here's my cookie data. People, these things called session identifiers in the cookies. If you store like ABC123, that cookie value is specific to your current user. Request, it's like my session identifier is ABC123. The framework is like, well, 123 person-specific things. Like he's logged in, here's his name. Each person, so each person will receive their own stuff.
And sorry, so a synonym for their own cookie would be their own unique identifier specific to that web page.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But cookies can store more than just the session. They can store any arbitrary content stored on the client. They're a very useful thing, but you don't want to use them too much because you have to keep in mind that every single time you do the data that has to be sent back and forth to the server. Yeah, I mean, you need to think about the purpose of the web servers is to super quickly is like receiving requests and returning requests. So your server is busy doing that for you. It can't do that on the same thread for somebody else. These are the longer it's going to take to send and receive data for us to get bogged down. This is not a big deal, right? If you were dealing with like this with your application, then this would be a problem. But these are not like a huge
And cookies are like the reason that we get certain ads over other ads, right?
And why Gmail decided to like make all of your Gmail accounts the same in any browser you go to every time
That's a little different, but similar concept. It's more like how I can't log into your user accounts because I don't have a valid session on my computer. If data from your computer and pasted it in my browser, then I would be logged in as you. When I was at Clemson, a few of my lab mates did that to me. They stole my cookies and put them on their own machines and logged in as me.
I feel like had access to all my accounts. Sorry.
So then it is a security concern for cookies.
You don't ever, that's a great point, you don't ever want to store any on a cookie. In general, with web requests, you never store vital information for that user in a cookie. Because it persists on their computer and use it.
Are cookies super pertinent to this lesson? Because I have another question if they are.
We store all of our session identifiers in cookies.
Somebody goes to the website, how do they know whether or not the website is going to take the information and put it in a cookie?
Process is transparent to the end user. Just by user experience, right? Like, I mean, it's not by law. It's just like when you visit website A, have a cookie which stores your session, or you don't. If you don't have it, it's going to send you the login page. And if you do have it, it's going to just send you whatever your profile is.
So if you have someone else's cookie, then like let's say you change your password, they can still access it through that cookie.
Yes. Except when you change your password in most modern day websites, they'll expire any sessions that currently exist. So
Yeah.
you'll probably be fine to change your password. But have a cookie with a valid session identifier. So technically speaking, I could make a cookie right now. The session identifier from my Facebook session, and I looked at the identifier and I changed it to someone else's session ID.
Oh,
I just refresh the page and it's done. But the likelihood of me determining that is very small because the session identifiers are like a long random string of digits.
but if they had access to your computer, they could do that.
If someone had access to your computer, they can take your computer. Everything.
Whoa.
So can you just kind of give us, like, if you go to a website right now, could you just give us a quick, small example of what that looks like on our website?
Sure. Let's look at TIO, for instance. So this is TIO right here.
Can you zoom in?
Yeah. So check it out. So if I go here to my, it used to be on resources, sources.
And how'd you get to that screen? You push Command what?
Alt J. Where the frick do they put the cookies? Application maybe? So here are all the cookies that are domain. So, very important concept. Domain can read are restricted to cookies that specify this domain. So if we look at one of the properties of these cookies, and it will be the domain that it's applicable to. In fact, I might want to pop this out because this is kind of hard to.
Wow.
So I'm trying to push my Control J and it's not working.
Oh, Command Alt J, not Control Alt J. The domain is a column here on this cookie specifiers. So we have key value pairs, which are cookies, right? Is the ioneer.com. You'll notice that none of these come from anywhere else. A can only read cookies from, it cannot read cookies from website B or website C. origin policy. Important security concept, because if you didn't have the same origin policy and you went to website A, and it could read cookies from all the other, and you could get all the session stuff from browser will only it'll restrict your users to the cookies that are applicable to the current domain. The same origin policy is something that will come up. Someone will ask you about the same origin policy in a job. It's a very important security concept on the internet.
Is sort of regulated by law.
Not a lot is regulated by law. This is not, we're not in the legal territory. This is a web security. So we're talking about why it is this way is because it has to be this way for anything to happen on the internet. You have to, I mean, and that's like the best argument for like pure capitalism there is, because people have decided this is the way we're going to combat bad guys from stealing our data.
Like, let's say that somebody is stealing your data, would it show up in here?
You would know what anyone's doing to anything.
Oh my God. Sorry.
What's worse is that if you visit a website over HTTPS, block here, do a discussion around cookies, which is valuable, which is okay, but we'll talk more about sessions in a sec. Internet routing works is that broadcast to all of our computers, and our networks or our network cards basically omit all the packets that are not sent to our machines. One's sent to every machine. Network packet analyzers. Traffic over a network. For HTTP instead of HTTPS, encrypted. It is encrypted, and cookie data is sent back and forth to the server every time you make a request. That means that if you're logging into a server that doesn't have HTTPS enabled, someone's on the network who's looking of the data unencrypted is being sent back and forth to a server.
Well, HTTP right now, not HTTPS. I'm on Facebook looking at it to see where.
There's no way going over HTTP.
Sure.
Mine says HTTP.
So
Here, HTTP.
Facebook would be sued.
So don't worry about that.
Oh, okay.
In the URL bars, it's HTTPS and padlock.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
as long as you see that padlock here, but that padlock basically means it's a valid certificate for this server.
So that long thing under value, when we look at the cookie, whatever is the cookies.
Yeah, those are the cookies, keys, and value pairs. So if I wanted to clear out all the cookies for TIO, I just hit this button and has no cookies, right? If I want to refresh this page, I have to log back in.
Let's say that you change computers. Your cookies are still on there, right? Like, so like if somebody doesn't have access to your new computer, but they've already got your cookie,
Has a session identifier, they can log it. They're logged in as you.
the session has nothing to do with your computer. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, okay,
One,
sure. Yep.
So session identifiers are stored in the cookie. So what else is stored in the cookie if it's not simply the session identifier?
Temporary things that, like UI stuff sometimes can be stored in the cookie, like improve like the current page. It's snippets of information, like there's a lot of tracking data in the cookies as well. Analytics is a framework that tracks people's movement across the internet. Cookie values to do that as well. Determine where you've gone, stuff like that.
How do you get the cookie?
JavaScript, you can get the cookie value. Since they're all sent to the server, you can get them on the server as well. And you can use the server to modify the cookies that are sent back to the client.
I manipulate it.
Add the session identifier. So that's how you do that. So what we're going to add to Hello Spark is multi-user support. So you can see how having one static user is not an ideal solution because, again, the server holds the user and it's not specific to the client, so everyone thinks of that one user. So let's make multiple users. So the first thing we're going to do is update our user field and replace it with a hash map of users. Your user, we're going to have static hash map string user users. Okay? Since we updated user of users, most route to add to our hash map instead of just setting the current user. If you're following along, you're going to import the session class. Basically the same. We're going to get our form. Query params login name is the same. So we have the name we're trying to log in as. Get a reference to the current user by referencing our hash map at that name. Hash map is going to contain the key, which is the username, and the value is the user object. If user is null, it means that user in our hash map, there's no user. We're going to create that user when we try to log in. So the same mechanism as yesterday. Normal websites will have an explicit like login page or create a user page. Right? In this case, when you try to log in as an invalid user, instead of kicking you back, it's going to just make a user for you. So object, and we're going to put that user object in our hash map at the name that we passed in. Now this is the new part. Reference to our session here, so request.session. Read the documentation. It says returns the current session associated with this request, or if there's no current session and create is true, returns a new session. So when we get a session object, we're going to call this attribute method to add basically the current session. So in memory, user's name as the context user. This is not going to get sent back to the client. Client is an identifier that references our session. So username is not going to get sent to the client. In session lives in memory in our web server. That session is like a random series of digits that points to that session object. There's a difference. Some people get confused about cookies and sessions. Right now, we're not storing values in cookies. We're just specifying we want this in our session. In memory on the server, reference will get sent back to the client. Now, sessions are cool because you can actually store relatively vital information because it's accessible from outside the server. Itself is what the server uses, and then it sends the ID to that session to the client. So if someone were listening on the network, they wouldn't be able to immediately access everything that exists on the web server. They just have the session identifier. Better, but not by a whole lot, but still better. Make sure you never, ever in your whole life log into a page that is running over HTTP. Actually, Chrome will probably stop you from doing that nowadays. Furthermore, if you sign into a website or you create a user on a website, and then they're like, hey, they send you an email. Hey, thanks for signing up for our website. Information is this username and your password is the exact thing you typed in as your password. Emails in the past, you should discontinue use of that. Because that means is they've stored your in the database, and they have not encrypted it. Steals that if someone gets access to the database, then they have passwords for every user.
Or in the database session.
No, it's not. It's not specifically related to session. It's just an aside. It's like,
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to relate.
it'll tell you what your password is,
Right,
basically.
right, understood, but where is that password? Is that stored on the server?
It's stored in the database, usually. Yeah. Okay, so once we add to our session, we're going to redirect back to the home page, and we have this return empty string just to complete our Lambda expression. So that's how we add a key to our session. So it says then we update the get route to get the correct user from the hash map. So let's look at this get route, and we'll update it in our code, and then we'll analyze it. Hash map here is distinct from the user's hash map, and I think this tripped you guys up a lot. This model hash map is specific to this instance of a view rendering. Trying to render a very specific view with a very specific model. So we need to have a hash map that's a local variable to this Lambda expression.
The hash map shouldn't be a field.
Correct. It should be a local variable in the current Lambda expression. So you're like, ultimately in this Lambda expression at a high level, you're going to decide which template to view into that template. Belong in a field to the class, it just belongs as a local variable to the current Lambda. Okay. In this Lambda expression, we're going to build a new hash map to our current session by calling that same request.session. Get the username by calling session.attribute username. We set the attribute down here by passing in the second parameter here. We just hit attribute at there, right? So this will get us our current session's username. Current user from our hash map at that username. User at that username, we're going to render the login page. User, we're going to put in our current model the name of that user. We're going to render the home page. Smart enough to do that? No. It is going to take that name key and then process our mustache template and display the name passed into the hash map. Cool.
Can you say the last sentence again? And do what with the mustache template?
Like normal. It's going to decide. It's going to use the current user based off the session to render. If the user doesn't exist, it's going to render the login page. If it does exist, it's going to render the home page. The current model with the name of the current user.
Template engine is like the runner, right?
Template engine is the object that you parse that. Like, because templates, there's many different templates that are available to an end user. They have like time leaf and free marker template language and mustache. There's a couple of three major options. If you had a template that was in a different templating language and you tried to use the mustache engine to template type, it would not work, right? In fact, no exceptions all over the place.
So that's important.
Well, we know that we're going to use mustache because at the beginning of this, we included mustache as a dependency.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
so like,
right.
it's not like we're going to be confused about which one we're using because we explicitly said we're using
And that was
mustache
when we like added it. Like,
Yeah,
okay.
in the beginning. Okay, so now what we want to do is to home.html, we're going to add a logout. So we can log in, let's log out. Home.html. Add a form just inside the body.
That's cool. So we basically said, like, I mean, metaphorically, like, this is the engine that we want to run our car, and our car is like our package.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
Like we have this template file and we have this model, process it with this engine.
Oh, that's really neat.
You got it, Joy? So we added a form here. Action is going to point to /logout, and the method is going to be post, and we have one button that just submits the form and has a text logout. Form post. What URL? So it's going to post to the action /logout. We have a problem because we've never heard of /logout yet, so we don't have an endpoint that matches up with /logout posting yet. So we need to add a route. Here's how we could do that. Oh, that's not, man, I zoomed all the way down to the bottom. I'm out. Yeah, it zoomed all. I don't know how that just happened, but it zoomed all the way to the code snippet at the bottom for logouts. So we're doing another example. Same concepts. Okay, so we're posting to this logout, right? This is a Lambda expression, just like before. In this Lambda, we determine what happens when we post to this endpoint. Keep the terminology straight. So what we're going to do is get a context of our current session. Session objects have a method called invalidate. So when you invalidate a session, it means you basically memory just dump all the values I have for the session, okay? And then you redirect back to the home page. Now keep in mind that when the browser goes back to the home page, it's going to run this exact same code. It's going to ask for the current session and get the username from session. And then since we invalidated the session, it's going to be empty. String that username. The username is going to be empty. So since it's empty, we're going to get nothing from the hash map. And since we get nothing from the hash map, it's null, so we have to log in. Right?
Right.
Just to circle back, all of these are lambdas. Okay.
Last couple of words you said, it goes back in and then we'll do the last part.
Just that you post with this form to this logout endpoint, it's going to invalidate your current session, which means dump all the values it has for the current session to a new URL, the new URL being the home page. So when the browser receives that response, it's going to then issue a new request to the home page. And then when it issues that new request, we know that the session is going to be blank. Effectively, we logged out, right? So we just started our web server. So let's check it out. Benny Poo. We'll refresh, we'll log out, and we no longer have this. Type Ben and log in, and then make a new incognito window, and then anymore because I don't have a current session identifier. So I can be like pants. So I have pants here and Ben here. So refresh this, it's still Ben. Refresh this, it's still pants.
Ah, no way. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. If we go here to application, we can actually analyze the format of the cookie that is sent back as the session identifier. So we can see here that we have one cookie on this page. It's the one that we set, and here is the session identifier. 18TL82P9EKTP1180. So you can see how it might be hard to guess that session identifier.
Yeah. Have access to it.
Yeah. If you visited a website over well, yeah. If someone had physical access to your machine, they could have any of your logins. Computers.
Yeah.
That was the lesson that I learned in lab that one day.
Yeah. Don't give anyone your computer.
I mean, most people are not malicious. Don't give just basically just don't give your laptop to people you don't trust, which is should already be doing that. So yeah.
So which part of the code is the second, so you've got get, and then you've got two posts.
I have login and log out. So I have a post for logging in and I have a post for logging out. Responsible for setting the current user session, and log out is responsible for destroying that user session. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is track an inventory of video games. So we're going to make a new project called Game Tracker. So Java, we're going to create a template command line app for new Game Tracker. It's going to be code, August 2016, Game Tracker. So we're gonna, like we did before, we're gonna open up our project structure page and we're gonna import the Spark core library into our project. Download this also. And then we're also going to import the Mustache templating language engine into our current project. So none of this should be really new so far, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you've heard,
Two buttons above cancel on that.
like instead of, when you navigate to a type that is in this library, instead of trying to download the bytecode for that type, it's going to download the actual source code for it. That's probably not related to what you're saying. Okay. What I anticipated. Sorry, hold on one sec, guys. My apologies.
Or should I start a new project?
Yeah, it shouldn't be there. Yeah, hold on. This is wrong. When I created the name and then I changed the directory, and then IntelliJ went ahead and updated the name for me, which is not what I wanted. So we're going to change the directory first. Code. We're going to add Game Tracker folder to that. That's what we want. Okay. So sorry about that. Re-add these libraries. Okay. So just like before, we need a resource folder. So we're going to go back into project and then go and make a new resources folder. So a new folder called resources, because we're capable of spelling things properly. I'll rename it in a second. So after I create it, I can go in here and rename it. So it's Shift F6. Okay.
So I went to my modules, project structure, modules, and then add.
You don't need to add a new module.
Yeah, just a file, right, or folder.
New folder. Yep. So inside resources, we have templates just like before. And then we need a login.html template. So we paste our login form here. We're good to go. So far, guys, this is again the same as what we've seen before. Nothing new introduced yet. So we have a temporary home.html that we want to create also.
When you were in resources, did you have to create a new folder for the templates? Or-
I did, yeah.
You did,
Yeah.
Yep.
Get our libraries right.
We've created a new project called Game Tracker. We've added Spark Core and Spark Mustache templating language support to our library using IntelliJ. And then what we need to do next is templates as well. So we have a login template and we have a temporary home template. That's Hello World so far. So since we're storing games, it makes sense for us to create a game class because that's a type of thing that we're going to reason about in our code, right? So let's make that game. By the way, Avery, last night I saw you use that automatically inject getters and setters and constructors. Find that.
That was the homework for Monday, and I was trying to figure out how to do stuff.
I have never seen that library before. A video on it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
I found that data.
Yeah.
Didn't work, so I followed
Okay. Well, you know, what the only thing it's doing is just at compile time, it's injecting getters and setters for each project field.
Okay. Yeah, because without it, it wasn't like the mustache wasn't able to get any data.
It has getters and setters and private fields and stuff. So we have this game. So in game, we're going to store name and then genre, platform year, and or platform and release year. We have a constructor for game that sets all those fields. So again, right, no real interesting new things going on yet. Those fields. We're going to have a public class user. The user is going to have that list of games. Okay. Names and they have games. Names and games. Or they have a name and they have games. So in our main class, which has nothing in it so far, first of all, create a static hash map of users. So this is going to store all of our current users. And then we're going to configure Spark to deliver the appropriate web page. Okay. Slash, and remember slash is our relative path, which is shorthand for your home page. We're going to get a reference to our current session and get a name, a username from session, and then we're going to get from our hash map a user at that name. If that user is null, then we're going to render the login page. Otherwise, we're going to the home page. Now, just like before, we need to add the post route for actually logging in. We're going to need the, this is what handles the forms. Goodness, I'm like failing at highlighting today. This is the route that gets run when you post the data from the login.html page. So the action for this is /login, post request here on line 34 of our main method. So again, string name is the params from the request login name. This has to match up with the name attribute on this text field. Get the user at that name. If that user is null, then we basically add a new, make a new user object and then add that user object to your current user's hash map. Same thing as before. after we put it to the hash map, we're storing in session the reference to the current user's name. Session variable, or we have our session set properly.
Dash login, the path logs into whatever action HTML, not the name of the HTML document.
Again, hold on. Here,
No, I'm talking about down.
This.
Slash login, so that's the path, right?
Mhm.
And if you go to our HTML login doc,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter that, it doesn't matter because it says action dash login, that's where that's gonna go. That's the map.
the front end doesn't know anything about any HTML files.
Okay,
It just knows, it'll go to that URL, and it'll be the server's job to figure out which HTML template file to render it back to the client.
okay. Cool.
That's how we're able to do this right here, where we render conditionally one template or another template.
So login HTML there versus to the name.
First to the template file that we made
Yeah.
up here. Go ahead. Okay. So we're going to have our form logout button here and also create game. And also we're going to have an ordered list of games to render. All that data. It's less than to point dash dash. So you end it with dash dash greater than. We just added to the home template button that goes to this URL, create game. Okay. Keep in mind, just want to point out that forms have the option of posting as GET request as well. And instead of being a part of the request body, it's going to post it to it's going to put it on the URL parameter. So have you ever seen like a URL with a question mark, like a bunch of text key value pairs? Like for instance, if you go to Google for stuff, because they use hash map elements. One sec. So Bing knows what to search for because in the form, it's a GET request form. So it's going to pass in the data as a variable Q, and the value is going to be test. Query string parameters. A lot of stuff happens to the query string. Like if you do pagination, like if you're paging through a list of things, frequently the page number will be in the query string parameter. The things you would put in the query string parameter are like, specify. Like if I put something in for page 4, I'll be like, I want to get page 10 and just replace that 4 with a 10. One case why you would choose a GET request over a POST request. They can conceptually do very similar things. There's a misconception that says that POST requests are more secure than GET requests. It's really true. Okay.
I can see why that would be though. Like why you think that GET requests were more secure than POST requests.
Right. The reason why it's not true though is because if you can read the URL, that means that your packet is not encrypted. If it's not encrypted, you have access to not just the path, but also the packet contents. Data. Yeah. All right, so line 9, we have input type equals text. Placeholder text is going to be game name. The name of this field is going to be game, and we're setting this width, which is, Luke would murder me if he saw this, as just 200.
Why?
Specify layout stuff in attributes.
Oh yeah.
You should let CSS control all display stuff.
Why are we doing that?
Because forms are with with CSS.
So we shouldn't do that under normal practice?
Well, what's going to happen in a regular workday environment is your front-end developer is going to show you what markup needs to be generated. It's your job to do the server-side processing that generates that markup.
Okay.
Front-end and back-end person. So you would never make the decision to put that with attribute there. Yeah, they're like, we want our form to look like this, and we're going to give you these assets to accomplish the goal. Here's the HTML that your server needs to generate. Like, take it, templating language to generate that HTML.
So we're on the server side.
We are the server.
We are the server.
I like that line. Neighbor? You're that, I have a question face on. I guess not.
We have a new mustache template after our
After your, sorry, say that again?
Spark post, we have a new mustache template.
Because the post request after it's finished is going to redirect the user. So there's no rendering of the template there. It's job to render the template. So keep in mind that, so we have create game here. And so we have this select, which is a drop-down list. If you ever see a drop-down list in the internet, that's how you do this. So we have value and text. This is what's displayed to the user, and this is what's sent to the server. Okay, so like if you select this and you hit submit, then it's going to send this guy here.
That's counterintuitive, like with Java, because string is like, right, in quotes.
Yeah.
So like last night when I was working on my project, or on the project, I was like, oh right, like that's what's in like HTML.
So we have the genre here, and we have platform here, right? These attributes selected and disabled for this first guy, because we want them to have to select something, right? And we want to disable them from being able to something else. And so we have a number, input type equals number. This is just going to specify this field only accepts numbers. On modern browsers, it will only let you put in numbers there. And the placeholder is release year, and the name of the field is game year. And a submit button. We have what's called an OL, which is an ordered list. In the internet, in HTML5 specification, if you want to display a list of data, frequently your options are OL or UL. Data and the order doesn't matter, you use a UL. Data and the order does matter, you have an OL. UL, you see the dots next to it, right? If you use an OL, you'll see numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like a series of steps. Of what writing HTML is like, HTML element for your data that most semantically describes what that data is. That front-end developers over there are learning. Maybe not today, but in general, they're learning that.
Goes back to our array list, right?
Yeah, so we're going to pass games through our model to this template. Alrighty. So since we posted to create game, we need to make the route that handles that post request. So we'll go back to our main class, and we'll add the spark.post create game endpoint. And our expression will do. I don't want someone to be able to post if they're not logged in, essentially. Added to the main class this post method. Game endpoint up until like 3 minutes, like a minute ago.
And it always goes after the bracket semicolon. Syntax.
Yes.
Okay.
We don't have to have that bracket semicolon on this line individually. So in there is because this post method call that's what we have inside that. So we can't just add another thing to that. The calls are distinct.
Its own page, right?
Yeah, yes. Each call to this post method describes and what we're doing when we get there.
Yeah.
Each call is going to build what's called a route table.
It's like itinerary,
Mm.
sort of.
More like a legend on a map. You see this, it means that, right? So when we get into MVC terms, you're going to have this route table concept is going to be more in your face. But what you're building right now is what's called a route table. You can think of it like a hash map. So the key is the path. The value is the action you're performing when you hit that path. So it'll get more complicated soon, but right now it's just that. You can't have routes with the same verb and the same path. Each one has to be distinct. We have a runtime problem. So if you're the one with the same verb and same path, there's no way for the system to know which one to take. Okay, so create game. What we're doing is we're getting the current session. So we're saying, who are you? We're getting this current user. But if we try to post a current game and our session resolution resulted in no user, create a game under a user that doesn't exist. So we're going to throw an exception here. User's not logged in. The Spark framework, typically when we threw exceptions before, it totally crashed our application. In this case, it's going to just throw a 500 error back to the client. The server is still going to run. It's going to handle that exception at a higher level and just return a 500 status code back to the user. Example of that in a second when we try to post. So if we're here, we know that we didn't throw an exception, so we can continue with the data that was submitted. We have a valid user.
Know that you need an exception there.
Right now.
So you have to throw an exception because that's an exception to like what we want to actually do.
Have to throw an exception. It's just how we're choosing to handle that event. Okay. Normally, if you try to create game direct back to like the home page, you can't do that, right? Or maybe it would take you to the login page. In this case, we're just deciding to throw an exception and bail. We're like, we're not concerned with that yet. Let's just throw an exception and leave. So if we're here, we need to get the data from the form submission. So we're going to get the data, the name for the game, the genre of the game, the platform of the game, and the game year, right? So keep in mind, these are all submitted as strings. So to convert it, we need to do integer.value of game object based on the data we passed in from our form. We have a valid user to add the current game to their game array. And then we're going to redirect, just like we did before. We had before, let's go ahead and add just a way for them to log out of the current page. So again, we have our current session. We're going to invalidate it and redirect. Let's go ahead and run this. So I'm going to enter my name and log in. Final Fantasy 7 RPG platform. Let's just say PS4 and release year like freaking 1996. Commit. So if you post to that, it's going to, and then redirect back to the home page.
Really?
Is it 97? So I can give myself a pass for not knowing that exactly. Because check it out. So Xbox One is what is displayed to the user. Xbone value was in the. So you have Xbone there. Yeah, that's just.
XB1.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like abbreviated.
Yeah. And I always pronounce Cone also, actually. But yeah, box 1 for sure. We have actually gone a while without taking a break, so if you guys want to just take maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just take 10 minutes. Come back at 11:20.
Fast at the end there, man.
Sorry?
You rush.
No.
Just speed up.
Felt like I needed to hurry up because I want to add just a couple of mustache stuff to this thing, but we're going to be a little bit short today on time, so end a little bit earlier today.
Okay. I've been running into issues with ports on when I'm like deploying to Roku.
Yeah.
I have this like 3-line if statement that I got somewhere on the internet that works. I can't get it.
From the internet, because I wrote something like that, like string test equals.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
me. Yeah. So what's going on there is that works in a lot of ways is that it receives context information from system environment variables. This is how a lot of stuff works.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's going to boot up a dyno. It's going to configure your port that is opened. And if you run your app on a different port, then it's not going to expects to have open. So you're not going to support it.
Run, but you can't connect to it.
And so what happens is that when you hit a URL, it's going to be on port 80 by default, right? It's going to forward your request based off of it's going to be like, okay, well this is Avery's app. Avery's app is running on this dyno on this other port. Listen on that port, that other port.
But should every app that we write have that sort of code that logic for ports?
Not necessarily. With Spark, by default, the port is 4567. For 80, that's also totally valid. You can deploy that to a web server and it'd be fine. If you have a large multi-tenant environment like Heroku has, though, it very frequently is that it frequently is the case that you have your own specific port to your application. Forwarding there. The whole environment variable thing, so you understand, it's just like it's just like it's an environment variable set called port, and then it runs on that. That environment variables are used typically to store contextual information about the target environment. So when you get into things like OAuth, it's called like a secret identifier key. Like if it were buddy, then they'd be able to hijack all user requests. It's hidden from everybody. In fact, one big issue on GitHub was that a lot of people were putting secret tokens in stories. And so you could actually search on GitHub for, which is pretty common across every app. It's like AWS documentation is you should store this as a AWS secret key ID. Here's my secret key. I'm gonna store my config file. I'm gonna put config file in GitHub and push it. And so pretty flawed because you could just search for that key and then you get everyone's keys.
I realized I was storing passwords in JSON.
Yeah. Yes, not a great idea. So what people typically do is they'll use, in fact, Heroku will let you manage your environment variables through the Heroku CLI. If you have an AWS secret key or secret key from Amazon when you generate it, and then you'll put it in the target environment, and you can have different keys for different environments. You're aware of the actual data, it just gets whatever it can from the environment variables. So if you're on a staging server, it's going to use your AWS keys potentially for your staging environment. It's just going to use the ones that are available for production. But you never ever put those in source control. Me, I have an app, Drive. It's a YAML file that is my secret tokens for every one of the OAuth endpoints I'm using. I add those to the config variables for each Heroku environment we have. That whole system.getInf thing is a pretty common thing when you're dealing with sensitive data, especially. But in this case, it's just an architectural decision by Heroku. All right, 11:18. Still have a couple minutes, but everyone's back. We could just continue. So this is basically the gist of sessions. We kind of went into a lot of different stuff today. I want to open the floor a little bit to questions, but I also want to just add one extra thing here. So if I log out, no, what I wanted to do was show like syntax, how you would prevent someone from seeing like one thing or another, right? So if we had no distinct login page, I don't know, let's like, what are we passing in here? Get requests for home pages, we're passing to our hash map. The name. So we have hash user. Navigate to the user class. Welcome. So like for our passing into our template, when we render home, we're passing in our user class as our model, getting the name field from our user class here. Then we say welcome name. And then if name doesn't exist, which never happened, then login or something like that. So if you want to have this all on the same page instead of having a login page, you could have these forms live together. So let's just do that real quick. Form login and log out. Okay, and then let's change our logic to just get rid of this. The reference to the login page on the home template. The problem is that we have login and logout here. So if we have like enter name Ben, and then this will log in, and then you also have the logout button, you can log out. This is not very conducive. So like Ben, we're logged in right now. We can say FFEI, and then 97. submit, and it will work rather. It won't work anymore. So we'll fix all these problems in a sec. But essentially, on this home page, if like the name field exists, we want to logout form. Alternatively, if it does exist, or if it doesn't exist, we need to show the login form. So if it's not name, and show that. Right. And not just this, we don't want them to be able to create a game unless they're logged in. So I'm going to paste this form inside this. Game form is only available for people who have names, users, right? And then otherwise you have this login form here. Logged in, I'll just let people see like games. Actually, I want this to be in there also, because the games belong to each specific person, so you're not going to be able to see anything. But at this point, it's kind of clean, right? I mean, you can see here that we have an area for people who aren't logged in. So if you're not logged in, you receive nothing but a login form. Logged in, you will receive a logout button to say like welcome Thunderdome name. Okay. So we have a logout form. We also have a create game form. And we also have a place to list our games. So let's refresh. Ben, log in. It fails miserably, and you debug it in front of your entire class. It might actually be enlightening, so you're welcome. Did this on purpose. We have a redirect back to this, so our session should be being stored, so our problem probably is this guy. Name. So let's set a breakpoint here and debug this. And refresh. That makes sense. Type in Ben. User is a current user. We're passing a user into home.html. Okay. Hold on. User's current name is Ben as a games list of nothing. What I'm trying to do here is add getters and setters to these guys. So I'm going to add these as private fields. Private. And then I'm going to add getters and setters here. And I'm going to re-debug this. Refresh the page. User's null, makes sense. Continue. Log in, Ben. This name is this, session's that. Seems like we're set so far. Let's continue. And our template syntax is still throwing problems at us, so that's an issue. Yeah, this is really for in the video. I just was trying to modify this on the fly real quick. So let's pivot a little bit. Let's make a hash map to store all this data instead of just passing in a user model. So let's say hash map string string. We'll pass in the model to our template equal to a new hash map. Okay, and that's not required. Thank you, IntelliJ. So so model.put name get name, and then model dot games is user dot. Now the problem is I made this model, this hash map string. Let's make it string object. Okay. So we have name and games we're passing in as our hash map values. So we have name and games as the two things we have in our template. So this should work just fine. And we get 500 internal server error. Let's clear our cookies. What's happening here? And refresh. And, if user not equal null, then add these values. We had a null user. We were trying to call get name on a no user. So that's going on there. Name. Thunderdome Ben. All right. So game name is FF. Let's say sir. 2001. Bam. So that worked. I bought a PS Vita just to play that game.
I do that with music.
Play the music?
No, I guess their release date.
Oh yeah, it's fine. So we log out. We logged out again. We can log back in. I'm gonna be Mike now, and Mike doesn't have my game list. So game name is Metal Gear Solid. You ever play that? Kind of guy. So that was probably released in '95.
96.
That was like way off.
Metal Gear Solid 1. release date. Hold on. I guess Solid is the name of the latest one. 87. Jesus Christ.
No way.
Yeah, it's the name of the first Metal Gear. Okay, anyway. So you can see here we have distinct users, we have distinct games, we have login and logout, we have conditional rendering of.
Oh, that is awesome to save the game.
Hash map lives in memory. It's an object in our, and it's tied to our session. Username. What's up?
Nothing, you just cracked your knuckles.
Oh yeah, I do that a lot without thinking about it. So does this all make sense to you? No, but what? Those are good. That's why we record them. Okay. So talk about what we're going to do tonight. So since we wrote a game tracker.
I don't know.
Yes,
Goldeneye.
it's clearly GoldenEye. All right, like one of the most legendary games ever created for the. All right. All right. Okay, so we're going to take our microblog that we wrote yesterday and we're going to add some stuff to it, right? So we're going to add a password field to the login form. Exist, create a new user, and store the password in the user object. If it does exist, check the password, and if it's wrong, don't let them log in. I think this was a hard mode requirement yesterday. Right? We're going to add multi-user support by making an array list of messages inside the user object. Lots of you guys did do that yesterday, so hopefully this should be an easy requirement. Say what?
Mhm.
I didn't get it yesterday, I fell asleep, I was trying it, but
Well, we'll try again today.
yeah, it made more sense what you did today.
Well, we have a lot of examples now, right? Okay, so let's see. In the create user route, save the username into session, the username out of session, and subsequent link to your user object, right? A log out button when the user's logged in, and then refresh the page so you can log in again with the new user. Form and messages.html, which lets you delete a message by entering its number. Add a form of messages.html, which lets you edit a message by entering its number in the text you want to replace it with. Okay. Don't be intimidated by this. This is a logical extension of what we've done so far. Okay. It's not a ton of code to get that to work. Right. So optionally, make the log persist data on the disk by encoding the data as JSON in each post route and decoding it when the app first runs. Save your post to a file so that when you boot up your web server again, you have the post still. And then make each item have its own delete button next to it so you can simply click the appropriate button rather than type in a number. So here's some screenshots. Like here's what it looked like before or after you log in. Here's after you log in, write a message. You can delete a message number or you can edit a message with here. Distinct forms here. Form elements. And here's the sign-in form here. And that's your assignment.
Edit's gonna be the hardest.
Talk to your ducky about it. I don't want to sound condescending. A duck really does help. Like if you try to reason through something and you have difficulty trying to do, actually explaining it to someone else, in this case, an inanimate object. Cool. I want you guys to use your ducks more.
Keep mine right here. Right here.
That's, yeah, I see everyone's duck right now.
Talk to it telepathically.
Yes, this must be what everyone's doing. Okay, so today we're ending a little early today, or it's 11:30. That's okay. More time for lab. But we're all done here with the video. So have a nice day, wife.